Hello, everyone. We are talking today about Majora's Mask, the sequel to Ocarina of Time. So, this is a very interesting video. I mean, all these things are unscripted, but Majora's Mask it's a weird game. Like, really, actually, genuinely very strange. Now, so first of all, I'll set up the story premise so we can get that out of the way. So this is actually one of the few Zelda games that is a direct sequel to Ocarina, to the previous game. So same universe, well, not for long. And so basically Link, at the end of Ocarina, goes out searching for Navi, and instead he gets lost in the woods. He gets his stuff stolen by this Skull Kid, who is just called Skull Kid in this game. And so he falls down this mysterious hole and he's transported to an alternative dimension. So this world essentially, it's a funny way to do things, right? You know, if you want to just reuse a bunch of assets from your previous games, it's it's an alternate universe. And well, it is. But it's a little bit lazy, but it works, I guess. So Majora's Mask. And so what happens is Link ends up in this new universe, and he's actually perpetually stuck as a Deku Scrub. And he's like half Link, half Deku Scrub. And so this whole mechanic, Majora's Mask, is that the main mechanic with this game is that there are a series of masks that you wear that transform you and your body. And of course, you have to, get to a certain point. And eventually you'll be able to swap between different forms and different personas, of which there are only a few. And then there are a bunch of other masks who just do weird, random, one-time things. And the other big trope about this game is that you start in a place called Clock Town, and there's a giant clock tower that is always counting down for 3 days or 72 hours. And what happens then, as you realize, is that the moon comes crashing down into the earth and obliterates it, and the moon has this grotesque face in it. So this entire universe, this entire game is honestly super, super strange. And I know for some people it is actually their favorite Zelda because it is so weird and strange. Ocarina was very kind of to the point, classic action adventure game with a very straight story. This one deals with a lot of depressing themes. A lot of characters die, which is how you get their masks, and their spirit basically lives on through it, which is why you can transform. But because this is Alt Zelda, I mean, this is a different alternate universe with reused assets. All of the writing is just slightly weird. Everything's kind of off tone. There's this whole side quest where you have to help this really short guy propose and get married to the inn owner, and then a man comes and steals their masks, and you have to get them both back. And it's weird, it's crazy, and just other things too. I think really the music in this game is just very strange, and the whole tone of this game is just bizarre. For example, this is, as far as I understand it, this is the first game to feature Tingle, the 35 or 32-year-old man pretending to be a fairy, and he's the map guy who also appears in Wind Waker, and he's this weird just guy. He just appears and is like, hey, I'm gonna tell you about stuff. This is also a very interesting departure from the traditional formula, because while you still have a map about as big as the rest of Hyrule, Termania as it's called, you only have 3 days to explore everything and get things before time restarts, and you lose all your items and all your rupees. There's a way to open up a bank account, and funnily enough, the bank account actually keeps all of your rupees, despite the time-lapse apocalypse, which is just is. So that's just how it is, for whatever reason. And this is just, I know, it's the black sheep of the series. It's just a very weird game in general. And, the whole thing that Link is now a Deku Scrub, and he's super depressed, and he can't really do anything, and like all his attacks suck and all this other stuff. And he's all depressed and everything. It's a very weird version of Zelda. It does not feel like. It is mechanically a sequel, but tonally, it's very, very different. And well, honestly, interesting. I don't really dislike it or anything, but it's just interesting how different it is. Also the fact when you put on each mask, you get this grotesque animation where your face contorts into basically a disfigured, tormented face when you turn into this thing as you scream in agony. For kids, it's just crazy. I don't know what else to call it. Also, the environments in this game are just kind of odd. Like there's a whole swamp level, and again, it's poison, and once you heal it, it stop becoming a swamp. It's interesting how this game, because it's on a 3-day cycle, it's kind of built for high replayability. So what was something in the previous Ocarina game that I always wanted to do is I always wanted to refight all the bosses and replay all the bosses, and that was never possible. But in Majora's Mask, all the bosses respawn every 3 days, or you have to do the time warp basically to get them back. In which case, it's very straightforward. What's also cool with this game is I feel like Zelda was a little bit or very much influenced by Shenmue, in the sense that all the people have their own time slots. They all work on their own schedule. People go to and fro, and there's only certain events you can get in this game when you get them at a particular time or hour. And then if you don't get them during that specific time frame, you're just locked out of it for until the next cycle restarts. But yeah, I guess on that, so they saw that and they said, oh yeah, no, it's a fully interactive world. People go to sleep, they wake up, they have different quests. It's like it's a real living, breathing city. They really wanted to push the technology of the RPG, another mile, so to speak. And we wouldn't see something like that until games really like Oblivion and Skyrim would come out, where you did have a similar thing, but really not quite as in depth. Yes, people go to sleep and they go to bed and whatever, but they also don't have really any quests besides, hey, can you get me 10 cabbages? In this, it's a bit more involved, obviously, and a bit more scoped and focused, and from a storytelling perspective. On that note, though, this is the one reason why a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with Majora's Mask, is that you cannot beat this game without a guide. I'm sorry, it is actually impossible. There are some things that you need to know how to do that just don't make any sense, or you just don't know, or you had to literally be at the right place at the right time. Otherwise, yeah, this game is what really sell strategy guides, and I do have the strategy guide for it still in my collection of books, because it was just so important. I remember I made sketches of how to read the clock at the bottom of the screen for Clock Town, and it still doesn't make sense to me. It's funny how it still just doesn't work after all this time. Again, you still have the Ocarina in this game. What's actually really cool is that you can actually transform into one of each races. So Link has a Deku version, he has a Goron version, and a Zora version. And when you bring out the Ocarina, what's really cool is that for each one of those races, they get a different instrument. So the Deku has trumpets, the Goron has drums, and the Zora has a guitar. And that's really, really cool. So it's like you have a little band of guys that, can play instruments. Not all at once, though, because you're still one person. But there's been a lot of cool little pictures and fan art and animation of those things. They also do give you like a little notebook to keep track of people's their quest line, so to speak. This game does not have a journal, but it does have this little booklet which tracks things. But I remember as a kid, I had no idea how to use it. It did not make sense to me at all. And because of that, I just had to use a guide, because the in-game tools that they give you are not well suited for that at all. Overall, mechanically, this game is pretty much similar, if not totally identical to Ocarina. The items work the same way. The A button, B button work the same way. You just have more more content to consume and different types of content. Also, interesting, weird mechanics that each race has in terms of transportation. The Deku Scrub can hop on water. The Zora can obviously swim through water. The Goron can take a shape of this ball and turn into a giant spiky thing. And riding around Hyrule as that is, or as Termania as that, is so much fun. It is actually an incredibly addicting thing. It's funny, actually, I forgot to mention the title of the actual game, Majora's Mask. So essentially the shopkeeper, the Happy Mask salesman who you meet, who is one of the weirder characters in the first game, is in this game, and he's like a main character. And basically he's like, that Skull Kid stole Majora's Mask, and Majora apparently is this like ancient cursed god, and now this little kid who had like emotional problems has a hold of it, and you don't even know his backstory or what his deal is, but basically it's like he's been possessed by a demon, and now Majora is causing the moon to fall and is going to destroy and wipe out everything. And so that's kind of the premise. So already it's a very weird dark tone setup, which is just really, really crazy. And of course there is a opposing force, the final mask in the game, which I won't say, but the final mask you get in the game is just the coolest thing ever. And it's funny because that mask and that power really doesn't make an appearance in any other game. I will say though that I think it's funny that they essentially co-opted the beam sword mechanics from the older Zelda games. Like, okay, how do we do it in this game? And that final mask is the answer. But yeah, I will say no more on that because it's a kind of a spoiler, and it's very, very cool. Another thing you'll see in this game is, again, the areas will be haunted. The mountain area is frozen. The swamp area is poisoned. The stone area is haunted. Or desert or rock or canyon area is haunted. And finally, the ocean area is stormy and turbulent. And so the way the game works is that even though you have to restart every day, you keep your key items and your masks. So, and once you unlock the route to a temple or something, even if like you can be in the middle of a temple solving a puzzle and the moon will be falling and the day will end and you will have to start over again. Like obviously you have the song to teleport back to the temple, and you keep all of your progress. Oh, actually, no. Do you keep all your progress in that temple? Yeah, so if you've unlocked things like the boss door, obviously you don't have to do the whole temple again, and you can go just straight to the boss room and fight the boss. And in fact, it's a fun thing to do a little boss run and fight all the bosses. What also is a very strange and interesting thing that they changed in this game, because of the time mechanic, that where you are in time does really matter, is that instead of having an overall save where you can save whenever you want, there are about like 5 owl statues throughout the world, only 5, where you can save your progress and come back to that point. And then of course you can teleport to them as well, using a certain song that you will learn. Again, a lot of the stories deal with loss and suffering. The bosses in this game, I would have to say, because they knew people would be fighting them over and over again, are really, really, really cool designs. Some of them are kind of odd, but no, most of them are actually really, really cool. And that's the other thing that's also very odd about this game. There are only 4 dungeons. Usually you'd have 3, and then you go to the second half of the game, which means 7. But no, you only have 4 in the 4 corners of the world in this one. And it's very, very strange because of that. Again, this game, it doesn't have the triumphant winning feeling and vibe that you have in the first game. It kind of like, things are a little bit silly, things are a little bit weird, things are a little bit depressing, and there's no real, overall resolution. It's like you make the world better, but things are still kind of messed up in a way. And so the main thing is that in this game, you go to an area, you find out what's wrong with it, you do the little preamble story thing, help the local tribe. Then you basically go on to find the temple. You defeat the temple boss, and basically what happens is that every time you defeat a temple boss, you are able to summon one of these giants. And so the end of the game is essentially to get all the giants so that they can literally hold up the moon and stop it from falling. This whole thing is just really interesting. Usually I'm like, oh yeah, that's this kind of lore, or Nordic, or Central American. But this whole lore and story is just frankly insane. I just, there's nothing quite like it, but it feels like a real mythology, which is just so interesting and so cool to me. I remember there was one mask in the game that was, I think, was Glitch, the all night mask from the lady who actually tells you all of the lore. And it's funny because you need to literally have it to stay up late and basically listen to her story so you can get a piece of heart. And so also in this game, what's different is you'll need different items, one to get into the temple and one in the temple from the temple itself. And it's funny, actually the main temple items you actually do get in this game are the different arrows from the last game, which are fire, ice, and light, which I just find is very funny. So all the other interesting kind of items you're going to kind of get either as side quests or as other things to get into the temple itself. As I said, there's a bunch of masks you can collect. Some of them do stupid things like you blow up and take, a bunch of heart damage, other things like this. And of course, what's really interesting, of course, is each one of the races and how they can interact with the world. How the Goron can roll up into a ball, the Deku Scrub can, hop on water, and also use these things called Deku Pads to fly around. And every time you are, you don't warp back in time fast enough. And it's funny, the first time it happened, I don't think there's a big difference between the moon like landing and destroying you and you warping back in time. And the way you warp back in time is you actually just play the Song of Time from the first game, as you find out. And by doing this, you basically go back in time instead of having the world just be destroyed. But even as a kid, I was super paranoid of letting the moon fall, even though I know I wouldn't do anything to my save. I had this idea it would erase all my data or something, or I'd have the reason I would lose something. I just didn't know what. But when the moon falls, you see this massive wall of flame and the whole world gets incinerated, and it just says, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" while the happy masked salesman laughs in the background. It is the weirdest, creepiest, like dystopian styled Zelda and style game that I've ever played. It's really, really wild, and the fact that it even exists is really interesting. One thing about the development cycle of this game that I recall is that this was originally being planned as DLC for Ocarina of Time, and it was Anuma, whoever the main guy was, basically said at the time, "Hey, why do DLC when we can do a full sequel?" And the guy's like, nah. Nintendo's like, nah, you can't do that. And apparently he pumped out a full game in not under 6 months, but something like that, something crazy, like under 6 months. And so that's how Majora's Mask came to be, apparently. I also think you needed like a Nintendo expansion or memory expansion card on the main Nintendo 64 to actually play this. There's a lot of really weird cutscenes where they use this really blurry effect, a lot of special effects and stuff. There's a lot of things in this game that technically, back then, were kind of marvels of technical feats. Oh, and I forgot one of the side stories is that the town is planning a giant festival on the day when the moon falls, and the mayor is really deciding if he tells everyone to evacuate or they just go on with the ceremony and hope it wards the moon off. But there's a lot of things about dystopian kind of not dystopian but almost nihilism, like what's the point of struggling, what's the point of fighting against the inevitable. And it's just really interesting to me that it's one of the main discussions, and Zelda is just so uncommon. It's like, everything's good, you defeat the bad guy, you save the day. This one, it's just so weird, so different. They really did their own thing. And I think Skull Kid as a antagonist is really interesting. Another thing I forgot to mention is that you don't find Navi in this game, but you find Tattle and her sister Tail. And And so she's a different fairy that guides you throughout the world, but looks almost identical to Navi. So she's a bit more yellow, I guess. And what's really interesting is how this game ends. Again, I won't spoil it or anything, but you kind of, it's very similar to other games like maybe Deltarune, I would say, and Undertale, in the sense that you kind of save. You save the soul of the person that you thought you had to defeat, and it's an interesting thing around the motivations of this character, and is Skull Kid really in control, or is Majora's Mask really in control? And it's a really interesting dynamic between the two. Again, I definitely prefer Ocarina over this game, but it still is a very worthy game, and it's almost hard, to call it a Zelda game because from a story perspective, it's just so different. Oh, by the way, the end area of this game, the actual physical location, is the most strange, weird, esoteric place I've ever been in a video game, where, again, no spoilers, but you basically go inside the moon, and what you think you're gonna find is nothing will prepare you for what you would think you would find inside the moon. It is the most interesting, esoteric, and bizarre thing I've ever seen in video games, honestly, and it really interests me even to this day. My favorite environment, maybe of all time, might be the inside of the moon in Majora's Mask, along with the story, or the dialogue rather, of the characters in there is really, really fascinating and strange and unique. Even today, compared to everything I've experienced, it still is one of the weirdest and interesting, and I love it. I'm not sure what else to say. I do love this game, not as much as the other Zeldas, but looking back on it, I almost appreciate it more now for being so different. It's such an interesting, weird, compelling game, and I love it a lot, more than other games for sure. And I don't know. I don't have a deep philosophical thing like I did for Ocarina for this one. It's that this is just a really interesting, cool game, and definitely kind of part of the Ocarina package. And I can't help but recommend it to anyone who who wants to play it. Anyway, guys, with that being said, I'll see you all later.